can say this because the two people who talked to me about it, I can't say this as a white middle-aged man without this preamble, but the two people who've written about it and the person who talked to me about it are variously Elizabeth Warren, the admirably liberal potential candidate for president of the United States, who I thought was absolutely brilliant, by the way, but Americans seem to find her absolutely marmite. I thought she was a fantastically interesting person. Named by Trump because she'd got some university position by claiming a smattering of Native American ancestry. Trump always referred to her as Pocahontas. Okay. Trump was actually, you've got to hand it to Trump, his nicknames weren't bad. I mean, he's got a lot of experience in the wrestling game, okay, in WWE, but his nicknames were pretty good. Sleepy Joe, yeah, it's not bad, okay. You've got to credit the guy with that. And her argument, and the argument which also was brought to me by Faye Weldon, who I knew quite well, she used to work at Ogilvy, that actually the double income household is kind of a disaster. Now, you go, this is, obviously, now, this is not to say that the freedom of women to go and pursue careers, not necessarily have children at all, not necessarily pursue motherhood, not be housewives. That is not to say for a second that that's a bad thing. Okay, just to be clear. Okay, but a consequence of it is effectively rising property prices and increased urbanization, which means that it's no longer possible to support a family on one salary. Now, when I was a kid, a working class household could just bring up kids on a single working class wage. Okay. You can probably do that now with social housing. If you're in the private housing market, forget about it. I came across a case the other day where someone who is single, so people who are single are, by the way, driven crazy by this because I've got two friends who are, one of them is a hospital consultant who cannot afford to buy a house because they're single, female, single, can't buy a house as a single female. Okay, you've got to get into a flat share. You have the absurdity, by the way, that places like Newcastle, the student quarter of Newcastle is the most desirable residential area in Newcastle. It's Jesmond. And the reason it's packed full of students is that 5 people sharing a house have more buying power than 2 people earning a salary, bringing up a family. Okay. And that although it started, and although that is micro rational and micro desirable, and it started as an option, if you want to do this, you can. It then transmogrified into an obligation, which is if you haven't got 2 salaries coming in, forget about bringing up kids, forget about owning a house. Now, what I'm saying there is that comes from the urge to understand, to hold 2 conflicting thoughts in your brain at the same time, which Elizabeth Warren and Faye Weldon, I think we can confidently say, even if I can't, I can confidently say those 2 people definitely could. And Elizabeth Warren wrote a book called The Double Income Trap. And she makes the point that, the need to get into school districts, to buy property, to bring up your children, effectively without 2 salaries, you can't actually move. You can't do anything. You're bidded out of everything, which wasn't the case before. And so, a degree of liberation has been lost. The extent to which the economic gains have gone to the treasury or to landowners or to property owners or to buy-to-let landlords from 2 people working in a relationship, rather than going to those 2 people themselves in the form of greater spending power. I think we've got to be actually cynical about that and say it hasn't been a great triumph from a consumer point of view. It's been brilliant if you're a buy-to-let landlord, fantastic if you own property in 1975, okay? Brilliant if you're the government because you've got more tax revenue coming in. Fantastic if you want to grow GDP. But from the point of view of the family as a unit, it's problematic.
I heard on Chris Williamson's podcast around if you want to optimize for happiness, minimize your commute time.
Well, you see, that's another thing. Another thing that's been killed by the dual income household is labor mobility. In the United States, one of the remarkable features of the United States and economy up to the kind of Reagan era was people were basically up sticks, moved 2,000 miles away across the country if there was a slightly better job there. You can't do that now, and maybe the better job was in Bentonville, Arkansas, right, which is where Walmart's headquartered. Now, I bet if you're a senior executive in Bentonville, Arkansas, at Walmart, you've got one serious fuck off house, right? Okay, all right. Now, You can't do that unless both of you. Now, the chance of both you and your partner finding a job in Bentonville, Arkansas, at the same time is infinitesimally small compared to the chance of one person finding a job there or one person finding a job in California or Los Angeles or wherever. Now, it's easier if you move to another megacity. It means that moving jobs out of megacities, which are effectively just extractive mechanisms for turning your salary into rent, okay? I think London's a shithole. I'm in East Kent at the moment. I think the whole thing's a racket. You're working for the Duke of Westminster half the time.
Exactly, mate.
Um,
As a consultant, I'm asked to move to London all the time, and I'm thinking, well, I don't want to single-handedly fund landlord
yeah.
lifestyles and TFL. I'd be squeezed with
There's some
nothing.
landlord living in Spain who's living off your work. And yet people don't seem to mind. I find this extraordinary. I mean, one of my predictions is that once we develop the electric motorhome, okay, think of a big American RV with a 200 kilowatt hour battery underneath. A significant proportion of the population will go nomadic. All right? Because you can afford a luxury motorhome, let's say £200,000, it's a hell of a lot cheaper than the flat. It's not going to depreciate that much, okay? And you go and buy 20,000 acres of woodland somewhere. No, that's exaggerating. But with the remaining money, you go and buy, a few hundred acres of woodland where you park the thing at the weekend. Why wouldn't you? Why ultimately? What you got electric motorhome? You got a stonking great battery underneath, which is feeding your microwave and your Nespresso machine and your flat screen telly. You got Elon's thing on the side, giving you your internet access. Okay, why would you? Why would you fucking bother buying a house? The only thing they haven't cracked is the toilet. Once they get like a microwave toilet, which just like dries your excrescences and makes it easily disposable, you've cracked the whole thing.
I think we spoke last time around employers solving for employees' everyday lives, like car valeting and running prescriptions, things like that, through the kind of office concierge. And what we didn't
I think
speak about
Pepsi.
is,
I think famously Pepsi does that.
yeah, that's what we spoke about. And I told you about
Yeah.
the gent Andy King from the Fire Festival who used to be their concierge. But what I'm thinking is there's no or very few in the UK large employers that have campuses where graduates, apprentices, young professionals can live and
Now,
offload a
if
lot of
you
their living costs.
if you've ever seen a Silicon Valley campus, that's almost unbelievable. Like Meta, in that there is either cheap or unbelievably subsidized street food of incredible abundance, basically designed to make you come into work. I have to say that the Brits, there are some British companies which have very, very precious employees. There are some fields where they know that everybody who works for them could go to Google. That's probably not true anymore, but 2 years ago, everybody who works for them could go to Google for 30% more overnight. And I think they calculated once that their annual expenditure on avocados was like £250,000. So it does exist. But largely speaking, what's happened in businesses is that the finance and HR functions try and reduce everything to an algorithm, which makes employees by and large just fungible. And the efforts placed into retention or other forms of staff reward other than uh, direct financial remuneration. Now, interestingly, creative people may much prefer, because if you're creative, one of the reasons is you need a bit less money if you're creative, because you can spend your money more imaginatively to achieve the same effect. I'm not suggesting it's okay to be poor. I'm not saying that. I'm suggesting that the impetus to be super rich, if you're imaginative, is reduced because a large part of the effort of the super rich is just doing what other super rich people do. And that's expensive. Okay. Maintaining your status among a kind of homogeneous group, you've got to move to one of 7 places, Dubai, central London, New York, Connecticut, Palm Springs, whatever. Okay. You can only live in a certain number of places. If you're more imaginative and you're happy to game the system, it's less expensive to be rich. Okay. Because your preferences aren't actually determined by those of other people like you. You know, so that's a yeah, no, no, no. And I think imaginative people, there's an element where there's a kind of a creative dividend in terms of being able to spend money imaginatively rather than in a conformist way.